A horse storms into the funeral of its deceased owner, neighing uncontrollably, then leaps straight into the grave, shattering the coffin to everyone's horror. But when the body falls out, a detail that no one had noticed before becomes visible. Everyone at the funeral drops to their knees, completely shocked, while the police are called immediately. A woman was on her knees before the coffin, her face flooded with endless tears. The room smelled of wilted flowers and burnt candles, and the silence was broken only by her loud, aching sobs.
"Oh God, why did you take my love away? I can't live without him. Who could ever do something like this to such a good man? My husband, who always helped everyone."
She cried, her voice hoarse and trembling. That was Stella, a beautiful 29-year-old woman, blessed with delicate features, now destroyed by grief. Sitting in a chair near the coffin where Michael rested, the man she had married only a few days earlier, she looked as if she had lost her very will to live. Her hands trembled as they covered her red eyes, and her hunched body revealed a weariness that went far beyond the physical. The guests exchanged discreet glances. Some wiped away tears, others simply bowed their heads, unsure of what to say. Among those silent faces stood John, the younger brother of the deceased. He was 27 and had just stepped into the main hall of the house to attend the beginning of the wake. The residence, vast and imposing, seemed small before the crowd. Family members, neighbors, and friends of Michael filled the place, all sharing the same sense of loss. John paused for a moment at the door, watching his sister-in-law cry before the coffin. His eyes filled with tears, and his throat tightened before he could utter a single word. With slow steps, he moved closer. Stella lifted her gaze, and upon seeing him, let out an even louder sob. Overcome with compassion, he wrapped his arms around her in a firm embrace, trying to lend some strength to the woman barely able to stand.
"I know how hard this is, Stella,"
he said, his voice breaking.
"After all, it's my brother in that coffin. I understand your pain, but it's time for us to say goodbye."
The widow pressed her handkerchief to her face, trembling.
"I didn't want this moment to come,"
she whispered through her tears. Her brother-in-law took a deep breath.
"Neither did I, but the time has come for us to say farewell,"
he said, trying to sound steady. She looked at him for a few seconds, her face carved by grief, then finally gave in.
"All right, you're right. Father, you may proceed with the ceremony,"
she said in a weak but resolute voice. The priest, who had been waiting in silence, nodded slightly and resumed the prayers. His voice filled the air with words about faith, farewell, and eternity. Everyone bowed their heads as the sound of prayers blended with Stella's sobs. When the ceremony ended, the room filled with murmurs and heavy footsteps. People began preparing to follow the procession to the cemetery of the small town, where Michael's body would be buried. The closest friends remained, helping with the final arrangements. John watched everything quietly. After a while, he stepped forward and said firmly,
"You can close the coffin."
But before the funeral workers could obey, the widow suddenly rose to her feet, raising a trembling hand.
"Wait, I want to say goodbye one last time. I promise I'll be brief,"
she pleaded. The men exchanged glances and nodded. The priest gave a small, approving gesture. She then approached, staggering as if every step weighed a ton. When she reached the coffin, she placed her hands on the edge and looked at her husband's pale face. She touched his cheek gently, her fingers gliding over the cold skin.
"Oh, Michael, my love,"
she whispered, her voice quivering.
You have no idea how much you'll be missed on this ranch. By me, your family, and our faithful horse friend. This is goodbye, but I'll always keep you in my thoughts.
For a moment, she stood still, staring at the lifeless body. The silence felt heavier than ever. Then suddenly, her fingers stopped over the man's chest. A shiver ran down her spine. She widened her eyes and looked at the priest, seized by sudden fear.
Father, Michael is cold, but I swear I just felt him breathe,
she exclaimed, her voice trembling. A murmur of astonishment spread through the room. The priest approached calmly, though his face showed confusion. He looked carefully at the body and shook his head with a tone of pity.
My daughter, it's only your heart speaking through longing,
he said, resting his hands on her shoulders.
Let him go. Your husband is at peace now.
Stella hesitated for a second, then allowed herself to be led away from the coffin. The priest gave a brief signal to the funeral workers, and the coffin was finally closed with a dry snap that echoed through the room. The procession followed in silence. Outside, the sky was overcast, and the cold wind made the flowers on the wreaths sway. When they reached the cemetery, John seemed uneasy. He kept his eyes fixed on the coffin, his face tense and his fists clenched. Everything about him showed his struggle to stay composed. He took a deep breath and gave short orders for the burial to proceed quickly. Within minutes, the coffin was already being lowered into the grave. Stella approached once more, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face.
Goodbye, my love,
she whispered, stretching out her hand as if she could still touch him. But this would not be an ordinary farewell. A distant sound began to draw everyone's attention, something like a hurried gallop. The noise grew louder, echoing among the tombstones. Suddenly, someone shouted,
"Look, it's the horse!"
Everyone turned at once, and there he was, a full-grown horse with long, brown, gleaming hair under the weak sunlight. His mane fluttered in the wind as the animal, in an astonishing leap, cleared the low cemetery wall and landed right in the middle of the crowd. There were screams. Some women stepped back, others clung to their husbands. The priest made the sign of the cross. The animal snorted, restless, its nostrils flaring. A thick scar ran across its neck, giving it a wild, almost menacing look. Their eyes met, fear, shock, curiosity, but no one seemed more surprised than John. He took 2 quick steps forward, eyes wide, and ran to the beast, gripping the reins tightly.
Well, aren't you a stubborn thing? How did you get loose, you mangy horse?
He shouted, breathless and angry, struggling to control the animal as it neighed amid the people's cries. And so, amid all that commotion, the heavy silence of the wake turned into pure chaos. The horse had invaded the burial. The horse neighed loudly, furious, yanking the reins with all its strength. Its muscles trembled and its hooves struck hard against the cemetery's dirt ground. Everyone stepped back, terrified, trying to understand the reason for such wild behavior. The animal, once gentle and obedient, was now untamable. It reared up, snorted, and pushed against anyone trying to restrain it, as if desperate to break free from anything that kept it away from the coffin where Michael lay. People exchanged confused and fearful glances. It was impossible not to notice the desperation in the horse's dark eyes, as if it were searching for something, or someone. John, the dead man's brother, was sweating as he struggled to hold it down, gripping the reins with all his strength.
"Hold that beast before it hurts someone,"
shouted one of the men, trying to help, but too afraid to get close. The horse resisted, pulling forward toward the coffin. The sound of hooves pounding the ground mixed with the screams and prayers of the mourners. Everyone knew about the deep bond between that animal and Michael. They had been inseparable. The horse had been raised on that ranch since it was a foal, and Michael treated it almost like family. Even so, no one could understand what had driven the creature to lose control like that. But Stella, who had cared for the animal during much of its life, knew every gesture, every reaction, every look. She watched closely and noticed something others didn't.
He's trying to tell us something,
she thought, her heart pounding. The widow stepped forward, ignoring the frightened and astonished looks around her. John, still struggling with the reins, was trying to control the horse that wouldn't stop neighing. He was almost managing to pull it away when Stella's voice echoed, firm and desperate.
"Wait! Open the coffin right now!"
Silence fell over the cemetery in an instant. Everyone looked at one another, unable to believe what they had just heard. The priest's eyes widened, and John let go of the horse for a moment, staring at his sister-in-law as if she'd lost her mind.
"What are you saying, Stella?"
he asked, breathless. She took another step forward, pointing to the coffin with a trembling hand.
"Open it, John! Now, don't you see? He's trying to tell us something."
No one dared move. The priest hesitated, the funeral workers froze, and the wind blew hard, lifting dust over the wilted flowers. But to understand that moment, the widow's despair, the maddened horse, and the mystery surrounding Michael's body, one must go back many years to when everything still seemed normal. Back then, Michael was a man with an easy smile and calloused hands. The rancher, known and respected by everyone in the region, had already come face to face with death more times than any man should. First, he'd lost his wife, and since the day he became a widower, his heart carried a constant shadow, a loneliness that seemed endless. Even as time passed, that pain never truly left. The ranch, once alive with the sounds of daily life, had grown silent. The laughter of his wife, which used to echo through the porch at sunrise, had turned into a sharp emptiness. Even the wind seemed to avoid that place. Still, Michael carried on. He worked from dawn to dusk, caring for the land, the cattle, and above all, his young son, Peter, a boy with a sweet smile and curious eyes. It was for him that the rancher kept going. Peter was his reason to live. Father and son did everything together. They worked in the fields, tended the animals, and on stormy nights they slept in the same room because the boy was afraid of thunder.
"Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you,"
the boy would say proudly.
"And I want to live long enough to see that, my son,"
Michael would answer, gently brushing the child's hair. But fate rarely has mercy on good men. It was on a hot day, under a clear sky and a gentle wind sweeping through the cornfields, that the boy began to cough. The fever came fast. The cold sweat, the labored breathing, as if his chest burned from within. Michael panicked. He took his son to doctors in town, spending everything he had, and everything he didn't, on medicines and promises. He spent nights on his knees, praying, begging for a miracle. For 3 days, he didn't sleep. He sat beside the boy's bed, holding his small hand and praying without rest. The candles burned down to their bases, their dim yellow light illuminating the child's pale face.
"Lord, don't take him from me too, please,"
the father whispered, tears filling his eyes. But the silence of dawn answered in God's place. On the morning of the 4th day, the room fell silent. Peter was gone, and Michael was alone once again. Time passed, but the man became a shadow of himself. He avoided his son's room, which remained untouched, toys still in their places, clothes folded neatly, the boy's scent still clinging to the walls. The ranch began to wither along with him. The cattle grew thin, the chicken coop emptied, and the fields, once green, turned dry and yellow. Only weeds grew. Only silence remained. John, the younger brother and his main helper, tried to cheer him up, but Michael barely heard him. He spent his days in the cornfield, the only part of the ranch he still cared for. It had been Peter's favorite crop. In the memories that haunted him, the rancher could still hear the boy's voice.
Plant more, Dad. I want to see the whole field turn yellow one day.
And the man had made a promise. He would fulfill that wish, even if it were the last thing he did. So, even under the scorching sun, Michael kept working. He watered, fertilized, and pulled weeds out with his bare hands. With every seed planted, it was as if he were trying to rebuild what he had lost. It was the last piece of his son that still remained. But on that suffocating night, fate came knocking again, cruel and merciless. John burst into the house, breathless and drenched in sweat, shouting his brother's name in desperation.
Michael! Michael! The fire is spreading! It's already reached the fields!
The rancher jumped out of bed, his heart racing.
What do you mean, fire? Where did it come from all of a sudden?
He asked, stunned. John gestured wildly, panicked and short of breath.
I don't know where it started, but it's already in the cornfield. It's close to the barn, spreading fast.
Michael heard his brother's words, and his heart nearly burst from his chest. He didn't think twice. He leapt from the bed, his feet hitting the cold floor, and without even putting on his boots, grabbed the hat hanging from the headboard. In seconds, he was running out the door, barefoot, kicking up dust on the dry ground. Outside, the world seemed to be on fire. The once dark sky now glowed with a terrifying red hue. The smell of smoke filled his lungs, burning from within. Flames rose high, devouring the cornfield that had once been his pride, the living memory of his son. Michael froze for an instant, stunned, his face lit by the crackling blaze. Then he screamed, voice raw and desperate.
Water! Bring buckets of water now. Hurry!
The ranch hands began rushing in from all directions, carrying buckets, cloths, anything that could help. The heat was unbearable, and the wind spread the flames as if hell itself had opened its gates. John and Ernest, the rancher's best friend, were already fighting the fire with shovels, tossing dirt over the burning corn. But the flames only grew stronger.
Michael, get out of there! You're going to burn yourself alive!
Shouted John, covering his face with his arm to shield it from the smoke. But Michael, consumed by despair, didn't hear him. His eyes burned with tears and fury.
No! I won't let what's left of my Peter turn to ashes. I won't lose this too,
he shouted, running toward the flames. He tried to smother the fire with a soaked tarp, but it was useless. The blaze roared like a living beast, wild, chaotic, hungry, and merciless. The wind howled and the flames spread even further, licking the fences, burning through the dry grass. John yelled orders, covering his nose and mouth with his hand to avoid breathing the thick smoke.
Bring more water. Come on, men, don't give up. Let's save this cornfield. Do it for little Peter. Do it for my brother,
he cried, trying to rally the men who coughed and stumbled among the fire. The heat was unbearable. Sweat streamed down everyone's faces. And amid all that chaos, Michael staggered, fighting against the smoke that burned his eyes and tore at his throat. He coughed, stumbled, but didn't stop.
God, please, I beg you, not again.
He murmured between coughs, raising his eyes to the sky veiled in soot. Then, through the crackle of flames and the roar of the wind, another sound broke through. A high, sharp, painful neigh. The sound of an animal in despair. Michael froze. For a moment, he thought he was imagining it. He shook his head, trying to see through the smoke. But the sound came again, clearer this time.
It's real. There's an animal in danger.
He thought. Then he turned to the men and shouted,
Did you hear that too?
Some stopped, confused, looking around. John nodded, not understanding. The neigh echoed again, this time from behind the barn, and Michael didn't hesitate. He ran toward the sound, ignoring the flames and the shouted warnings. John and Ernest followed him, even without knowing what they were about to find. The smoke was thick, the air unbreathable. But through the fiery glow a shadow moved, small, trembling, struggling against something. When they got closer, the sight broke the heart of any man. A young foal was trapped between the twisted barbed wires of the fence. Its thin legs trembled, eyes wide open in pure terror. The animal tried to break free, but every movement only made the metal cut deeper into its flesh. Michael dropped to his knees in despair.
My God, he's trapped. He won't get out on his own.
He cried. John grabbed him by the shoulder, trying to bring him back to his senses.
Michael, I know it's horrible, but we have to go now. The cornfield dash.
But the rancher interrupted him, almost shouting,
Wait, we have to save the animal.
He said, starting to pull at the wires with his bare hands. His brother held him tightly.
Are you out of your mind? If we stay here, the fire will reach us,
He warned, coughing hard. Michael ignored him. His eyes were fixed on the foal, and his hands were nearly burning against the hot metal.
I won't leave him here to die.
He answered without hesitation. John stared at his brother, stunned.
Michael, the cornfield can still be saved. If we get distracted now, we'll lose everything.
Michael stopped for a brief moment. He looked at the foal, then at the field. The flames devouring the corn Peter had loved so much. Time seemed to slow down, and amid the crackling fire and the animal's cries of pain, he finally understood what his heart had been trying to say all along.
Now I understand.
He murmured, voice breaking.
No matter how much I plant, my son isn't coming back. He's gone forever. But this little one, he still has a chance.
His brother tried to reason with him.
Don't let your emotions take over, brother. The wind's too strong and the wires are wrapped too tight around him. The fire will reach us before we can get him free.
But Michael raised his gaze, determined.
I'm staying.
He declared without hesitation. John took a step back.
Are you sure, Michael?
He asked. The rancher nodded.
I am. You go. I'll stay.
He said firmly, his eyes locked on the foal. At last, John pressed his lips together, nodded silently, and shouted to Ernest,
Let's go! Now!
The two of them ran toward the cornfield, disappearing into the smoke and fire. Michael remained there, kneeling on the ash-covered ground, his face burning from the heat, his hands shaking but resolute. He began freeing the animal, wire by wire, bending the metal with all the strength he had left. Each movement drew a whimper from the foal, who neighed in agony. The sound was heartbreaking, but the rancher didn't stop.
Easy, boy. Easy.
He said, trying to calm it down while the fire crackled closer and closer. The problem was that, no matter how careful Michael was, freeing the foal was taking too long. Each cut wire felt like a new battle, and time had become his worst enemy. John's warnings were coming true before his very eyes. The fire was closing in, roaring loudly, devouring the air and the earth like a living, starving beast. The flames were already reflected in Michael's eyes, but he stayed calm. Sweat ran down his face in streams, mixing with soot, and the heat seemed to melt the air around him. Still, he remained strong, with a strength only a man who's lost everything could know. His hands, already cut and bleeding, fought against the steel. Finally, with a sharp snap, the last wire broke. The foal, exhausted, fell to the ground, its body trembling, breathing with difficulty. Michael collapsed beside it, wrapping the small creature in his arms, shielding it with his own body, as if he could protect it from the fire's heat.
There you go. You're free now.
He murmured, holding the animal's face against his chest. But the poor foal was too weak to stand. Its legs shook, its chest heaving in despair. The rancher realized that if he left it there, it wouldn't survive. Without a second thought, the man lifted the animal in his arms. Its body was heavy, burning with fever and fear, but he held on. The heat was unbearable. Michael's back and neck burned from the nearness of the flames, and the air tore at his lungs. He knew that if he let go of the foal, he could escape the fire easily, but there was no chance of that happening. So, to find courage, he began to shout, more to himself than to the animal.
Come on, little one. We're gonna make it. We're getting out of this together.
The ground burned beneath his feet. The smoke stung his eyes, but Michael didn't stop. He pushed forward through the fire, stumbling, coughing, feeling his body about to give out, and still he kept going. At last, he broke through the veil of smoke and reached the ranch's lawn, where the air was cooler. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath, and gently laid the foal down on the damp grass. For a brief moment, the man believed he had defeated the fire. His heart pounded, and a sigh of relief escaped his lips. But when he turned around, what he saw knocked the ground out from under him. The cornfield, that field he had tended with love and tears, was completely destroyed. The ears of corn had turned to dust, and the once green field was now nothing but a gray blanket of ash and smoke. Everything Michael loved, the ranch, his dreams, the memories of his son, had been consumed. The fire, treacherous and cruel, had won. Yet, as he looked at the small foal lying on the grass, alive, breathing, he managed a faint smile. Small, but real. In the days that followed, Michael devoted himself entirely to the animal's recovery. He spent his mornings and nights by its side, cleaning its wounds with clean cloths and feeding it by hand.
Come on, be strong, my friend. You can do it,
he would say. The foal neighed softly, responding to the man's voice, as if it understood that this human was the reason it was still alive. Caring for the animal became a ritual for the rancher, and for a man once buried in grief and loss, that new purpose gave his days meaning again. Time passed, and the little foal began to recover. Its body was still frail, its movements slow, but life pulsed in it once more. With time, the small survivor became a strong, sturdy, energetic horse. Michael had not only built a bond of friendship with the animal, he had also been marked like it. The burns they suffered that night had left identical scars, thick across their necks, as a symbol of what they had endured together. One morning, while brushing the horse's mane, The rancher smiled and said,
Well, would you look at that? Our scars are exactly the same. I've never been one to believe in destiny, but this is making me rethink it. What do you say?
The horse neighed loudly, shaking its head as if agreeing with its owner. Michael laughed, giving the animal a friendly pat on the neck.
See? Even you think fate brought us together?
He said, a genuine sparkle in his eyes. Despite the happiness, the rancher knew the animal still needed specialized care. He did what he could, but lacked the technical knowledge required. So he decided to look for a trustworthy professional. Before leaving for town, he called his brother. John, always eager to help, approached with a rag over his shoulder and replied with enthusiasm.
Don't worry, brother. I'll give this horse a fine set of shoes. I want him perfect for you.
Michael smiled, satisfied, and left for town, leaving the horse in John's care for a while. A few days later, he returned, and he wasn't alone. By his side walked a woman with a determined gaze and a firm expression. Stella. She was the caretaker he had hired to oversee the treatment of the injured animal. Stella was young, 29, but already carried the experience of someone who had dedicated her life to caring for horses. She was beautiful, with brown hair tied in a simple bun, and strong hands that showed she knew exactly what she was doing. When they arrived at the ranch, Stella's eyes went straight to the horse. It only took her a few seconds of observation to notice something odd in its gait. Without saying a word, she walked into the stable. Michael was surprised to see her enter without asking permission. She knelt down, ran her firm hand over the animal's hoof, inspecting it carefully, and frowned.
Can't you see this horse is in pain?
She said, looking firmly at the rancher.
The horseshoe was put on all wrong. It's hurting him.
Startled and visibly concerned, Michael was speechless for a few seconds under Stella's sharp tone. Her firmness sounded like an accusation, and he, caught between shame and surprise, quickly tried to justify himself.
I didn't know. I wasn't here when he was shot. My brother did it.
Then, his expression of discomfort turned into anger. The rancher raised his voice, impatient, and the echo of irritation filled the stable.
John, what kind of lousy job is this?
He shouted, looking around. His voice reverberated through the yard, startling a few chickens and making the horse neigh softly. But John didn't appear. No answer came, only the cutting silence of the ranch. Michael huffed, wiped his forehead, and stormed out, muttering something Stella couldn't quite catch. The caretaker crossed her arms and shook her head, watching him disappear through the doorway. She had seen this kind of scene countless times before. Wealthy ranchers, nervous and shouting at workers without really understanding what was happening. She frowned, thinking to herself,
Another one who only knows how to give orders and neglect his animals. They're all the same.
She reflected silently, watching the horse paw the ground, irritated by the poorly fitted horseshoe. She sighed, resigned, already imagining that she'd have to fix the problem herself later. But to her surprise, Michael returned just a few minutes later. In his hands, he carried heavy farrier tools, a hammer, pliers, and nails, and his eyes held the steady focus of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Without saying a word, he stepped back into the stable. Stella raised an eyebrow, curious, and stood still, watching quietly. Michael approached the horse calmly, speaking softly to soothe it.
Easy, boy. We're gonna fix this right now,
he murmured. He secured the animal safely and knelt beside it. Then he began his work. He carefully removed the wrong horseshoe, examining the marks it had left on the hoof. The rhythmic sound of the hammer echoed, blending with the horse's slow, steady breathing. With each movement, the caretaker realized this man knew exactly what he was doing. It wasn't the clumsy gesture of a spoiled landowner, the way he held the tools, the care in his hands, the focus in his eyes. Everything showed true skill. When he finished removing the old shoe, he cleaned the hoof carefully and fitted a new one, fastening it perfectly in place. Strike after strike, firm and precise. Sweat dripped down his face, but his expression remained calm. After a few minutes, the work was done. The horse, relieved, gave a soft neigh and shook its head. Michael smiled, ran his hand along the animal's neck, and said kindly,
There you go, partner. Now you can walk without pain.
Stella stood there, unable to hide her surprise. She had expected an arrogant rancher who knew nothing about his own animals, but before her was a skilled man, someone who not only knew his craft, but truly loved that creature. She stepped closer, examining his work. She ran her fingers over the hoof, checking the fit of the new shoe. Finally, she nodded, surrendering a small, approving smile.
Yeah, that's better.
She admitted. The rancher simply nodded, wiping the sweat from his hands with the rag in his pocket, unaware of the caretaker's curious, admiring gaze. Meanwhile, outside the stable, a shadow moved between the fences. John was watching everything from a distance, hidden, his face tense and his fists clenched. His eyes burned with pure resentment, a mixture of jealousy and rage eating away at him from the inside. With every gesture Michael made, his brother's fury grew. He watched as Michael was praised, as the horse obeyed him, as the woman admired him, and it made him tremble with rage. His eyes twitched, his jaw clenched, and he muttered through gritted teeth,
That damned horse. I thought I could make him break his leg while running with my brother and get rid of them both at once.
He whispered bitterly. The wind carried his words, blending them with the rustle of the trees. But John kept muttering, revealing the filthiest secret the ranch had ever hidden.
I could have taken over the ranch the day I set fire to that cornfield if it weren't for that meddling horse. But that's all right. I'll find another way to take what's rightfully mine.
It was the cruel truth. John, the youngest brother, Michael's right hand, had been the one behind the fire that nearly destroyed everything. He was the one who poured the kerosene and convinced other workers to help him, all driven by greed. Michael could never have imagined that his own blood carried such betrayal. While one brother plotted his downfall, the other was only trying to rebuild what little was left of his life. The following days passed peacefully, and Stella kept visiting the ranch to monitor the horse's recovery. She adapted quickly to the routine. She was punctual, dedicated, and had a straightforward way of speaking, but never arrogant. She spoke little, but her actions said everything. The way she ran her hand through the horse's mane, the patience with which she brushed its tail, the calm look in her eyes as she cleaned its wounds, everything about her radiated care and skill. Little by little, Michael began to admire her. He saw in her a strength that mirrored his own. And Stella, as she observed that humble, hard-working man, saw a generous heart hidden beneath the exterior of someone hardened by pain. With time, they began to share more than just the care of the horse. Their conversations flowed naturally. They talked about everything: feed, crops, rain, but also about loss, faith, and starting over. Sometimes, Michael waited for her at the ranch gate, sitting on a wooden bench, hat resting on his knee. Other times, Stella arrived before sunrise just to watch him ride through the fields, the wind in his hair, dust rising behind the galloping horse. On one of those mornings, as the sun rose and painted the reborn fields gold, Stella smiled at the sight of them together and asked,
It's been over a year since I started coming here to take care of your horse, and I've only ever heard you call him Buddy. Why not give him a name?
The rancher stopped for a moment, holding the reins, thoughtful.
Well, I don't know. I guess I call him that because that's what he is to me. He's my good friend. Isn't that right, big guy?
He said, stroking the horse's neck. The animal neighed cheerfully, stomping the ground as if he understood perfectly. Stella laughed, shaking her head.
Looks like he likes the name,
she said, still smiling. Her eyes sparkled as she watched them, overcome by a strange feeling, a mix of tenderness and admiration.
It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. That horse trusts you like he's known you all his life.
With a serene voice and a distant gaze, Michael replied,
Yeah. He saved me without even knowing it. After everything, he's the one who made me want to stay.
The words lingered between them, and they exchanged a look. The shy smiles that appeared on their faces betrayed a feeling that, after being long suppressed, was finally beginning to surface. They tried, out of respect, propriety, and the invisible barrier between rancher and caretaker, to hold back that growing flame. But, as always happens with what is real, it grew on its own until it became impossible to contain. Little by little, they gave in. What had started with caring for a horse and simple conversations about feed had turned into a constant presence in each other's lives. Over time, their love blossomed like a plant watered by days of care. The rancher, who had walked like a living ghost through his land for years after losing his wife and son, finally felt his heart grow calm again, for the first time in so long. The pain remained, but now there was room for tenderness once more. Weeks passed, and the affection between them grew strong, as natural as caring for the foal that had once saved Michael's life, now healthy enough to gallop freely across the open fields. One ordinary afternoon, when the smell of hay filled the barn, Stella arrived to find Michael rummaging through a pile of straw with clear concern on his face. With the light humor that always helped her mask her nerves, she teased,
You're not looking for a needle, are you?
He gave an awkward smile, his eyes still marked by focus.
No, it's something much more important. Help me look.
She joined him, digging through the hay beside him. And then, between straw and dust, Michael pulled out a small closed box. Something that looked like it had come straight out of an old movie. When he opened it, inside were 2 rings, simple but beautiful, shining even through the barn's dust. He looked at her with such honesty that Stella's legs went weak. With a half smile and the courage that only men in love seem to find, he knelt among the hay and said,
Miss Stella, would you do me the honor of marrying this old rancher?
It wasn't a joke. There was nothing artificial, only a pure, heartfelt truth. Overwhelmed with emotion that made her chest tighten, Stella threw her arms around the man she had come to love so deeply, and, through tears and laughter, replied with joy and conviction,
Yes! Of course I will!
Michael slipped the ring onto her finger with the reverence of someone sealing a new promise of life. The horse, companion through long nights and witness to the hardest moments, approached at that exact instant, as if understanding the importance of that embrace, and nudged Michael's shoulder gently with its muzzle, wanting to be part of it. Stella smiled and let the animal share in the moment. Not long after, Stella moved permanently to the ranch. The house was filled with new laughter. The routine grew lighter, and the barn, once full of shadows and painful memories, soon echoed with conversation and gentle joy. But not everyone shared their happiness. When John learned of the marriage, he shut his eyes and felt a tightening in his chest, not from sadness or longing, but from rage. In a fit of fury, he slammed his fist into the barn wall so hard that it splintered the wood. His fingernails dug into the old pine, leaving marks deep as his hatred.
Damn it! If my brother marries her, all the money, the land, and the families will slip right through my hands. I have to do something.
He screamed inwardly, his anger boiling like a furnace. And do something he did. In the following days, the schemer sowed lies as carefully as a farmer plants corn, with patience, precision, and malice. He planted doubts in Stella's mind, forged letters, torn notes, arranged encounters meant to show her false evidence. He set traps, left furtive messages in her path, even falsified handwritten reminders, all to make her believe Michael was betraying her. Stella, who had trusted the man who'd faced fire and given her a new home, began to waver. The letters were convincing, the clues carefully designed, and soon anguish replaced joy. She began locking herself in the bathroom for hours, hiding her face to cry in silence. Between sobs, she whispered to herself,
I can't believe it. After everything we've been through, after all those promises of love, could Michael really do this to me?
And while she suffered, the horse, always sensitive to the moods and scents of the ranch, seemed to sense the deceit that lingered in the air. Its behavior changed. It grew restless near John, neighed loudly whenever the brother approached, and more than once even bit him, as if truth itself had taken shape in teeth and instinct. Sensing the animal's strange behavior, Michael spoke in a tone of surprise mixed with gentle reproach.
Hey, buddy. Calm down. That's John, my brother. He's family. You can't attack him,
he said, trying to reassure the horse. John, however, ignored the animal's reaction and stayed firm in his scheme. After several days of poison sown, Stella could bear the pain no longer. Engaged and broken-hearted, she packed her bags and announced she was leaving. The rancher, stunned by the sight, found her in their room with her suitcases ready, her eyes red from crying.
Wait, my love. What's all this? Are you going somewhere?
He asked, bewildered. She wiped her face, her voice trembling with grief.
I'm leaving, Michael. I found the letters from your mistress. I know everything you've done. I tried to convince myself I was wrong, but I just can't take it anymore.
Michael struggled to find words, completely confused.
A mistress? Letters? What are you talking about, my love?
But she no longer believed the man she loved.
Don't pretend you don't know, Michael,
she said, shaking her head. Before she could go on, a loud, frantic neigh cut through the house, sharper and more terrified than any they had ever heard. Both froze. Michael rushed to the window and saw through the crack that the horse was agitated, rearing up in the stable, as if something terrible was happening inside.
What's that? Buddy's in trouble,
he exclaimed, alarmed. Though torn by the pain of what she thought was betrayal, Stella dropped her bags and said,
Let's go.
A few minutes earlier, inside the barn, John had been scribbling the final lines of his wicked plan. The scratching of his pen across the paper seemed to mark the end of everything good. With a cold stare, he muttered to himself, satisfied with his own cruelty.
Now I just need to write a letter pretending to be Stella. saying that the real reason she left was because she betrayed him and didn't have the courage to tell him face to face.
John wrote quickly, his fingers stained with ink, his breath uneven with suppressed laughter. The pen scraped against the paper as he whispered through his teeth, unable to contain the twisted excitement that bubbled up from his chest.
Ha ha ha, and that'll be the end. That'll break my dear brother for good. The coward won't survive this blow, and then he'll hand me this ranch that should have been mine all along,
he said, grinning at his own evil brilliance. The sound of his laughter echoed through the empty barn, mingling with the rustle of the hay. But he wasn't alone. Standing watch, as always, was the horse called Buddy. The animal, who could sense danger before any human, had seen John slip inside and followed him curiously into the barn. The villain, absorbed in his writing, didn't notice the horse's keen gaze fixed on him from the doorway. When he finally did, he turned around, his face twisted in irritation and mockery.
"Yeah, you heard me, you worthless beast,"
he sneered, raising his voice.
"This whole ranch will be mine, and that includes you. Now get out of here."
He waved his arms, trying to shoo the animal away like it was an insect, but the horse didn't move. On the contrary, it planted its hooves firmly in the ground, snorted, and began to advance slowly. Buddy's gaze was steady and fierce. John took a step back, startled.
"Get out of here, you stupid animal,"
he yelled, but the horse kept coming, neighing louder and louder until the man lost patience. He reached for his belt and pulled out the large machete he always carried. The blade caught the light seeping through the cracks in the wood.
"That's enough. I'm sick of you. One more step and you're finished,"
he barked, eyes blazing with fury. Buddy reared on his hind legs, neighing in panic at the sight of the weapon. His nostrils flared, his body trembled, and he took a few steps back.
"Shut up, you stupid beast,"
John shouted, trying to intimidate him, but the sound that followed made his face go pale. From outside came hurried footsteps and voices growing closer.
Buddy, everything okay in there?
Michael's voice echoed through the barn walls. John glanced quickly at the letters scattered across the table. He thought about grabbing them, destroying the evidence, hiding everything. But he knew there was no time. Sweat ran down his forehead. He shoved the machete into his belt and fled through the back door, empty-handed. Seconds later, Michael and Stella rushed inside. The horse was still snorting, agitated, turning its body toward the table. There, spread across the wooden planks, dozens of scattered papers screamed the truth the villain had left behind. Stella stepped closer first, her hands trembling. Michael, still confused, looked down at the letters and read the furious, hateful scribbles. His expression changed with each line, rage and sadness mixing into one.
Someone's trying to tear us apart,
he said heavily, exchanging a look of shock with the woman. Stella nodded, stunned.
Yes, someone set us up,
she said, gripping her fiancé's hand tightly. That moment of revelation brought them back together. After so much pain and doubt, they were once again united, though now more cautious, more wounded, and carrying a bitter awareness that the enemy was still near. The discovery brought relief and fear in equal measure. Weeks passed as they searched for clues, trying to uncover who had plotted against them. They questioned workers, investigated old letters, but nothing concrete came up. Doubt hung over the ranch like a ghost, and in time, they realized they couldn't postpone love forever because of fear.
We can't let evil win. If they think they're going to separate us, they're wrong. Let's move up the wedding. I want to marry you tomorrow, my love,
Stella said one evening, watching the sunset over the fields. Michael simply smiled and nodded silently. And so, the wedding took place. The afternoon was bright, with a clear sky and a gentle breeze. The ceremony was simple, just as Michael had always dreamed. A few tables covered in white cloths, flowers picked from the ranch itself, and the sound of laughter mingling with birdsong. Neighbors came, ranch hands too, and even some relatives appeared. Curious, happy faces everywhere. The corral was decorated with colorful ribbons and makeshift chairs. Stella walked in wearing a light, simple dress, nothing fancy, but with a natural grace that came from within. As she crossed the corral, the horse buddy neighed loudly, as if blessing the moment. Everyone laughed, and even the priest smiled, moved. Michael, dressed in a light-colored suit and eyes glistening, couldn't hide his smile.
Not even in my worst days did I imagine life would give this back to me,
he said, watching the woman walk toward him. Stella smiled, curious.
Give you what?
She asked softly. He sighed and answered with heartfelt honesty.
Hope and happiness.
Applause followed his words, and the celebration continued, filled with toasts, embraces, and music. But not everything was joy. John, the rejected brother, had not given up. He watched from afar, hidden among the barn's shadows. His hardened face and bitter eyes revealed the hatred boiling in his chest. He waited for the right moment to appear among the guests, pretending to be friendly. He blended into the crowd with fake smiles, handing out handshakes and false congratulations. But inside, his fury grew with every laugh he heard, with every loving glance between Michael and Stella.
Look at those lovebirds,
he thought, grinding his teeth.
So happy, so carefree. We'll see who laughs last, little brother, when you lose another wife and come crawling back to your real family.
His gaze burned with pure vengeance, and this time, everything was perfectly planned. John waited patiently, watching the guests' movements until he spotted a young waitress carrying glasses of wine toward the couple. The plan was simple and deadly. He had arranged for the girl to serve Stella a specific drink. The glass containing the poison looked exactly like the others. The villain watched nervously from behind the tables, heart pounding fast.
It's time,
he murmured, his eyes gleaming as Stella lifted the glass to her lips. She raised the glass, ready to toast, unsuspecting. Michael looked at her, and in that instant he noticed something off. The waitress was trembling, her wavering gaze betraying fear. Something was wrong. Without thinking twice, he acted on instinct, an instinct he didn't know he had. The man stumbled on his own impulse and grabbed the bride's glass before she could bring it to her lips. Stella laughed, thinking it a playful tease.
Hey, you little smart one,
she joked, not imagining what was about to happen. Michael, smiling, brought the glass to his mouth and drank it all at once. The taste was bitter, but he didn't comment. He simply set the glass down on the table and looked at the woman with the same tender gaze he always had. Seconds later, the smile vanished. His face went pale. His hands trembled and his body lurched backward. Stella widened her eyes.
Michael, what's wrong?
She cried, trying to hold him. He tried to speak, but no words came. A chair toppled. His body collapsed to the floor with force, and the eyes, once full of life, lost their shine. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The music cut out. Laughter died, and silence took over the celebration. Stella knelt beside him, shaking the body of the man she loved and screaming with all the strength left in her chest.
Michael, get up!
But before we continue and reveal what happens next, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. That way, YouTube will let you know whenever a new video drops on our channel. In your opinion, do animals have a sixth sense? Can they sense when something bad is about to happen? Yes or no? Tell me in the comments. Also, if you had a horse, what would you name it? I'll mark every comment with a lovely little heart. Now, back to our story. Buddy, who had been grazing calmly in the pen beside the hall, pricked his ears the moment he heard Stella's scream. The sound cut across the entire ranch. Michael was falling in front of everyone. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. His body toppled, and the silence of the party was broken by a single neigh. Loud, desperate, as if the animal felt the fall of the man who had once saved him. The music stopped, the laughter died, and panic took over. Guests ran from one side to the other trying to help. Stella collapsed to her knees, crying over her husband's body.
No, it can't be. He was fine. He was fine.
She screamed, her voice trembling. The ranch hands panicked. Some ran to fetch a car, others called for the priest. The chaos grew by the second. And in the middle of the crowd, John watched the scene, pale. The villain observed the tragedy he himself had set in motion, but the outcome had slipped from his plan. Michael, not Stella, had drunk the poisoned wine. The town doctor was summoned in haste. He arrived quickly, a doctor's bag in hand, heavy steps on the wooden floorboards, his face trying to project calm. But as soon as he examined the body and checked for vital signs, the confirmation came in a heavy silence. There was nothing more to be done. The body was cold, the eyes unresponsive, and there was no pulse.
"I'm sorry, but he's dead,"
the doctor said. John watched the upheaval like someone assessing the outcome of a botched job. In his mind, he muttered impatiently,
"Damn it. This wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it'll do,"
he whispered, a requiem for the guilt beginning to rot inside him. What John didn't know in that moment was that his plan had already been doomed to fail long before the poisoned toast. The night before, while the ranch slept, he had hidden himself in one of the oldest storage sheds, rifling through boxes and jars in search of something forgotten. A dangerous know-how his grandparents had kept in low voices, guarded for generations.
"Here it is. The recipe for a deadly poison, undetectable even by the best tests."
John had rejoiced when he found the yellowed parchment. Excitement flashed in his eyes. He acted as if fulfilling destiny, stirring an ancient cauldron, mixing powders and liquids with hands that did not tremble, producing the substance he believed to be merciless. Meanwhile, Buddy remained vigilant. The horse, who often saw what man could not, had followed the younger brother out of pure instinct, driven by a need to protect. While John stepped away for a moment to fetch a clean jar, the animal, guided by impulse, lifted its hoof and kicked a nearby water barrel. The liquid poured in a rush into the cauldron, spilling as if fate itself had decided to intervene. The poison, meant to be pure and deadly, became diluted, weakened by bad luck and the water that had spilled inside. When John returned, he cursed at the mess.
"What the hell happened here? This place is full of rats,"
he complained, wiping at the water with his boot. But he decided it wouldn't matter. He poured the contents into the jar anyway and walked out, filled with the blind conviction of a man certain of his victory.
"No matter. It'll still work. That witch Stella is going straight to hell,"
he said, confident that the damage would be enough. And so, the ranch, which one day had celebrated Michael's wedding, was now in mourning for his funeral. The place was suffocated by grief. Workers moved back and forth, trembling hands preparing the wake. Warmth seemed impossible in that heavy air. Everything moved in slow motion, as if pain itself could stretch time. Stella sat pale beside the coffin, running her fingers over the rigid face of the man she had loved. There were no more words, only silent pleas whispered through her trembling hands, begging the body to react, to return. Later, everyone gathered in the main room where the coffin stood at the center, surrounded by wreaths and flower arrangements that seemed to cry out for hearts that no longer answered. And at the stable window, Buddy watched the scene in restless silence, eyes glimmering, body tense, as if holding his breath, ready to act. John adjusted his tie like an actor stepping back onto the stage. He moved to the front and with a falsely calm tone, tried to begin the ceremony.
"Let us begin,"
he declared, his hand trembling behind the mask of concern everyone believed. The priest opened his Bible upon the lectern and spoke in a measured, soothing voice, filled with the words of consolation.
Let us now say farewell to our dear friend and family member, Michael,
said the man of faith, head bowed. While the liturgy unfolded, tearful faces bowed and hands intertwined in silent prayer. But in the heart of the house, something different was happening. Something unspoken, yet deeply felt by the horse in every nerve of his body. Buddy, unable to contain his grief, suddenly stormed into the house. Without hesitation, he trotted through the corridors and advanced toward the coffin, driven by a longing any loyal soul would understand, the need to be beside the one who had once saved his life.
Hey, stop that horse!
Shouted some guests, startled and frightened by the boldness of the animal defying human ceremony. Before the horse could reach the coffin, John intervened forcefully. He grabbed the reins and held the animal back with brutal strength, like a man trying to hold back an explosion.
"Stand still, you insolent beast,"
he bellowed, yanking Buddy's body violently. Stella, seeing the scene and sensing the horse's fear and despair, rose quickly and tried to intervene with gentleness and reason.
Hey, calm down! He's just grieving for Michael. There's no need to hurt him,
she pleaded, hands outstretched in a gesture of peace. John, eyes blazing with fury and face hard as stone, snapped back with contempt, still holding the animal.
"That horse is ruining my brother's ceremony, that's what he's doing."
Suddenly, the horse began to thrash wildly, his whole body consumed by rage mixed with instinctive protection. He neighed loudly, his hooves pounding against the wooden floor, his eyes burning like fire, drawing every gaze in the room. John gripped tighter, but the animal kicked, twisted, and fought back, snapping at the air. The sound was deafening, echoing through the entire hall. With every violent movement, the horse inched closer, until, in one sudden surge, he bit down on the younger brother's arm, tearing from him a muffled scream of pain.
"Ah, you demon!"
shouted John, gritting his teeth as he tried to free himself from the enraged beast. With brute force, he yanked the reins hard and dragged the horse outside, shoving and cursing all the way. The clatter of hooves echoed across the floor, then faded. The guests stood frozen, whispering in fear, while Stella watched in silent shock. Her body, weak and hollowed by grief, no longer had the strength to protest. Her tear-filled eyes followed helpless as Buddy was taken away. At the barn nearby, John shoved the horse inside violently. The animal kicked and snorted, but the villain had come prepared. In the dark corner, driven deep into the packed dirt, stood a heavy iron stake with a thick chain fastened to its end.
"I knew you'd be trouble, you nosy beast, but I came prepared for this,"
yelled John, grabbing the chain and locking it around one of the horse's legs. The screech of metal on dirt rang sharp and cruel through the space. Buddy neighed loudly, pulling at his leg, but the chain was short. The villain laughed mockingly and walked to a shelf cluttered with tools and dusty bottles. He rummaged, muttering, until he found a small wooden box.
"But I know this chain won't be enough to hold you, not when you've already ruined half my plans,"
he said, turning toward the horse with a sinister grin.
"So I talked to a few contacts and got something that'll make sure you won't be a problem anymore."
From the box, he pulled out a small vial filled with a clear, thick liquid, a concentrated sedative used only in veterinary emergencies. John lifted it to eye level, studying it under the faint glow of the oil lamp, and laughed in satisfaction.
"Relax, buddy. This won't hurt a bit. You'll drift off peacefully, like an angel,"
he sneered, opening the vial and drawing the substance into a syringe. The flickering light danced across the metal needle, making it gleam.
"I made sure to get a sedative strong enough to take down 3 horses your size. Will it kill you? Maybe, but that's just how it goes."
The horse pulled at the chain with every ounce of strength it had. The sound of metal striking the dirt was desperate, frantic. It tried to break free, but the scoundrel was skilled in handling animals, at least when it came to domination and control. John moved closer, syringe in hand, body hunched in a defensive stance. Buddy lifted his head, snorted, and let out a neigh so powerful it echoed across the fields. But no one came.
"Quiet!"
The man roared, lunging forward. The horse tried to step back, but the chain jerked him forward again. John drove the needle deep into the animal's neck and pressed the plunger, injecting the liquid. Within seconds, Buddy's body began to weaken. His legs shook, his neck drooped, and the eyes, once bright with life, grew heavy. He staggered, still fighting to stay upright, until he finally collapsed onto the dirt floor with a dull thud. John exhaled with satisfaction and wiped the sweat from his forehead.
"There. Die just like your idiot master,"
he muttered, tossing the syringe aside and leaving the barn without looking back. Outside, the air hung heavy, and the distant voice of the priest echoed again from the house where the wake was still taking place. Stella sat on one of the chairs beside the coffin, her face buried in her hands. Grief consumed her in a way that felt almost physical. Her red eyes, trembling lips, and slumped body revealed the pain of someone who had lost the person they loved most in the world. From time to time, her voice broke through the silence of the room, weak yet powerful enough to fill it.
Oh God, why did you take my love away? I can't live without him. Why, Lord, would you take such a good man, my husband, who always helped everyone?
She cried, unaware that she was no longer whispering. She was shouting. Her words echoed off the walls, reaching every guest. Some cried with her, others averted their eyes, uncomfortable before such raw suffering. Even the priest bowed his head, moved by the scene. And among those listening was John. The villain had returned from the barn, discreetly wiping the bite wound on his arm and hiding his satisfied grin behind a mask of false grief. He watched his sister-in-law sobbing, and a cold, cruel thought crossed his mind.
"Yes, cry, you miserable woman. It was supposed to be you in that coffin, not my brother,"
he thought through clenched teeth. But the youngest brother could act. He was skilled at turning hatred into compassion. Taking a deep breath, he forced a mournful expression and walked toward her, pretending concern. Sitting beside her, he draped an arm around her shoulders.
I know how hard this is, Stella,
he said, in a carefully measured tone.
After all, it's my brother in that coffin. I understand your pain, but it's time for us to say goodbye.
Still sobbing, Stella replied in a trembling whisper.
I didn't want this moment to come,
she said, her face hidden in her hands. John, impatient and eager to end the wake, spoke quickly.
Neither did I, but the time has come for us to say our farewells,
he said, trying to sound moved. The woman took a deep breath and, defeated by exhaustion, nodded slowly.
All right, you're right. Father, you may continue the ceremony,
she said, wiping away her tears. The priest gave a small nod and resumed the sacred readings. The murmurs of prayer filled the room once more, wrapping everything in that same heavy, reverent air. Michael's body lay serene, surrounded by flowers, every gaze fixed upon him with sorrow. When the ceremony ended, the whisper of goodbyes began. The guests stood slowly, some clutching handkerchiefs, others embracing in silence. It was time to proceed to the small-town cemetery, where the body would be laid to rest. A few close friends stayed behind to help with the final arrangements. John, taking charge as always, raised his voice.
You can close the coffin,
he ordered, his tone authoritative, jarringly out of place amid the solemn atmosphere. The funeral workers stepped forward, ready to obey. But Stella suddenly raised her hand. Her voice came out firm, even through the tears.
Wait, I want to say goodbye one last time. I promise I'll be brief.
The men stepped back respectfully. She stood up with difficulty, staggering slightly, and approached the coffin. The silence was absolute. She leaned over her husband's body, her face only inches from his. Her trembling fingers traced his cold skin.
Oh, Michael, my love,
she whispered, her voice breaking.
You have no idea how much you'll be missed here on the ranch. By me, by your family, and by our faithful friend Buddy. This is goodbye, but I'll always think of you.
Stella's fingers, which had been caressing Michael's face with tenderness and sorrow, suddenly froze. The movement stopped, as if a current had run through her body. Her expression changed. Shock washed over her pale features. She turned slowly toward the priest, her voice trembling in fear and disbelief.
Father, Michael's cold, but I swear I just felt him breathe,
she exclaimed, caught between hope and terror. A murmur spread among the guests. The priest raised his brows in confusion and stepped forward. He approached the coffin carefully, leaning over the still body. He studied it for a moment, waiting, as if searching for a sign, then sighed deeply. With tenderness in his voice, he placed his hands on the woman's shoulders and said,
My daughter, it's only your heart speaking through longing. Let him go. Michael is at peace now,
the priest said softly, guiding her away. Stella let him lead her, still dazed, unsure whether to believe what she had felt or to dismiss it as a delusion born of grief. Then, with the priest's permission, the coffin was finally closed. The creak of the hinges blended with the quiet murmurs of people wiping their tears. Moments later, the procession began its slow journey toward the small-town cemetery. The hearse rolled gently down the dirt road, and behind it followed the mourners, silent, walking together in farewell to the man everyone had come to respect. But while mourning filled the procession, something else was happening in the barn, the same place where so many stories between man and horse had begun. There, lying on the straw, the horse named Buddy remained in a deep sleep. From outside, his body could be seen twitching, his legs jerking in involuntary spasms, as though something tormented him. His breathing was uneven, sweat running down his neck and catching the faint light seeping through the cracks in the wood. Inside the animal's mind, a nightmare was taking shape, the worst kind. He saw Michael falling, saw Stella's tear-streaked face, and felt that something terrible had happened. Years earlier, that same man had risked everything, his life, his very soul, to save the helpless foal that had once struggled amid the flames. Now it seemed it was the horse's turn to repay the debt. His instinct told him his master was in danger. And even under the weight of the sedative that had left him trapped in an almost deadly sleep, something inside him refused to accept paralysis. But how could he fight the impossible? The drug John had injected was strong enough to bring down 3 full-grown horses. There was no reason Buddy should awaken. No force could defeat it. Except one: love. Then the impossible happened. The horse's body began to tremble, and his once lifeless eyes slowly opened. His nostrils flared, his chest heaved with strength, and air rushed into his lungs like a breath of rebirth. Within moments, the horse was on his feet. He wobbled at first, dizzy, shaking his head and neighing weakly, but soon the sound grew louder, the sound of life. Buddy was back. But the battle wasn't over yet. A heavy iron chain still bound one of his legs, fixed tightly to a stake driven deep into the ground. He pulled with all his might, but the metal held firm. The animal paused, breathing hard, and then, as if remembering, his gaze softened. He recalled every moment shared with Michael, the warmth of the fields, the days the man had fed him by hand, the gentle words, the gestures that had once saved his life. He remembered Stella too, her kindness, her soft touch, and how she must now be drowning in sorrow. The horse's heart pounded faster, each memory transforming into strength. He pulled again, harder this time. The clang of iron rang through the barn. His hooves sank into the dirt. His muscles trembled. Nothing. But he didn't give up. He lifted his head, as if looking for a sign, and neighed loudly, a cry that echoed across the ranch like a call from the soul. Then he pulled once more, and this time, the miracle happened. The chains didn't break, but the entire stake gave way, ripping from the ground with a dull crack, sending up a cloud of dust and earth. Buddy was free. The horse reared up proudly, neighing in triumph like a warrior breaking free from his prison. Without hesitation, he turned toward the barn door, which burst open with a single strike of his hooves. Outside, the dirt road was already filling with dust, stirred up by the funeral procession. But he didn't hesitate. With the strength of one born to run, Buddy began to gallop. The sound of his hooves slicing through the silence of morning. His brown mane whipped in the wind, and his bright, determined eyes were locked on a single destination: the cemetery. Meanwhile, the burial continued. At the cemetery, the priest recited brief prayers, and John, more anxious than sad, hurried everything along. He wanted to end the ritual quickly, like a man afraid of being exposed. The mourners stood quietly, faces marked with sorrow. Within minutes, the coffin was lowered into the grave. The thud of the wood hitting the bottom echoed like thunder in Stella's chest.
Goodbye, my love,
she murmured, tears falling uncontrollably. But that goodbye would not be final. At that very moment, a shout tore through the crowd.
Look! The horse!
Someone yelled, pointing toward the cemetery gate. And there he was. The horse Buddy, his long brown mane flowing in the wind, leapt powerfully over the low wall. The impact of his hooves on the ground made the earth tremble. People stepped back in shock. The animal, panting, seemed guided by divine urgency. Every eye turned toward the scene, a mix of awe and disbelief. Even the priest stopped his prayer, unsure whether he was witnessing a miracle or madness. John, meanwhile, went pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he ran to restrain the animal. He grabbed the reins brutally, forcing the horse's neck downward.
"Well, you insolent brute. How did you get loose, you mangy beast?"
he shouted, trying to disguise the fear creeping up inside him. But Buddy was more determined than ever. He pulled hard, neighing, pushing forward, desperate to reach the coffin. His hooves pounded the dirt, his gaze fixed, as if he knew exactly what needed to be done. Stella watched, confused, a strange feeling rising in her chest. This wasn't madness, there was a reason. Something the horse was trying to say. She raised her voice, firm and resolute.
Wait! Open the coffin!
Silence fell over the cemetery. John, filled with outrage, turned to her, gesturing furiously.
"What? Are you insane, Stella? Hasn't my brother suffered enough? Do you really want to defile his body now, to disturb his rest?"
He shouted, his voice echoing among the tombstones. But Stella stood firm.
Something's wrong. Buddy's been acting strange ever since Michael died,
she said, staring straight at her brother-in-law. John tried to ridicule her.
"You're really going to open the coffin because of some horse's tantrum? He's not a person, Stella. He's just an animal,"
he sneered, trying to hide his unease. But Stella stepped forward, her voice steady, her gaze unshakable.
Listen, John. I trust this horse more than I trust any human being on this earth. Open the coffin, now!
She commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. The funeral workers, too afraid to disobey, complied. Their hands shook as they lifted the lid. Stella leaned in, her heart pounding wildly. For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. But as she looked again at Michael, reality hit. He lay still, skin cold, face serene. John let out a short, nervous laugh through clenched teeth.
"See? Dead. What did you expect? For him to suddenly sit up? You need to accept that my brother's gone, like we all have,"
he said, forcing a grin that barely concealed his fear. The fear that, perhaps, the impossible was about to happen. But the horse remained restless, his hooves scraping the damp soil of the cemetery. John, still arguing with Stella, failed to notice the opening he had given the animal. Buddy seized the moment and, in a single swift motion, charged toward the coffin. The sound of his hooves thundered through the air, breaking the stillness of the mourners. When he reached Michael's body, the horse lowered his head and gently brushed his muzzle against his master's face. The gesture was tender, almost human, filled with all the longing and loyalty that creature had carried in his heart. Stella, overcome with emotion, stepped closer. Her heart pounded wildly as she watched the desperate animal longing for one last touch. Then she knelt down and wrapped her trembling arms around both of them, man and horse. In that instant, she felt something. A chill ran down her spine and her eyes widened.
Wait! I felt it! I'm sure of it! He moved!
She exclaimed, her voice breaking between disbelief and hope. Everyone turned at once. The shuffling of feet stopped, and silence fell over the cemetery. The priest was the first to react. He stepped back, clutching his crucifix against his chest.
But this is impossible,
he murmured, his voice trembling, but it wasn't. Michael's chest began to move, slowly, like a breath returning to a body after a long absence. His eyes opened with effort, and a raspy gasp escaped his throat. Then, weak and trembling, his body lifted itself inside the coffin. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the crowd. Stella pressed her hands to her mouth as tears poured uncontrollably down her face. Then she rushed to her husband, throwing her arms around him, laughter and sobs mingling together.
Michael! You're alive!
She cried, her heart exploding with relief. He was still dazed, unsteady. His eyes blinked rapidly, fighting the light. Stella held his face between her hands, trying to calm him.
Breathe, my love. Breathe. You're here with me.
She said through tears, supporting him so he wouldn't fall. At the back, John stood motionless, the villain's face drained of color, his eyes locked on his brother, alive, breathing, speaking, and horror took hold. For a moment, he no longer looked human, but like a statue frozen in fear. It took Michael a moment to understand where he was. His voice came out hoarse and faint, filled with confusion.
Stella? Buddy? What happened? Did I die?
He asked, his eyes lost. His wife, still sobbing, ran her fingers through his hair.
We thought you were dead. Oh, God, it's a miracle. Thank heaven you're alive, my love,
she said, smiling through her tears. He blinked, still trying to make sense of it all.
But how did this happen?
He murmured, glancing around, bewildered. Stella took a deep breath and explained what she could.
I don't know, but Buddy was acting strange. It's like he knows something we don't,
she said, looking at the horse, who stood perfectly still, his eyes burning as he stared straight at the villain. Then the animal seemed to understand exactly what he needed to do. He lifted his head high and fixed his gaze directly on John. Silence once again swept over the cemetery. The villain, feeling his body turn cold, stepped back twice.
Why are you looking at me like that, you filthy beast?
He asked, trying to sound firm, but his voice trembled. Buddy trotted toward him, steady, determined, head low, eyes locked on his target. John raised his arms in panic, bracing for an attack, but the horse didn't bite or kick. Instead, he pressed his muzzle into the villain's shirt pocket and yanked something free.
Hey!
John shouted, trying to stop him, but it was too late. The paper had been ripped out and fell right into Michael's lap, as he still sat upright inside the coffin. The rancher picked up the crumpled sheet, still confused.
What's this?
He asked, unfolding it. As he read the scribbled lines, his eyes widened. His expression shifted. Surprise turned to anger, then to a heavy silence of painful realization. It was the recipe for the poison. He looked up at his brother, sadness and fury mixing in his gaze.
John, how could you? You, my own brother,
he said, his voice heavy and trembling. The villain swallowed hard and began to stammer, desperate to hide the truth.
No, Michael, you've got it wrong. I only had that paper to investigate what happened to you, I swear.
He tried to argue, but his voice faltered. Around them, faces began to change. The guests stared at John in horror. The priest, pale, made the sign of the cross and murmured a prayer. The villain realized the truth had finally been exposed. Desperate, John looked around for a way out and blurted the most absurd excuse he could think of.
It was the horse. He planted that paper on me. You all know he hates me. He's trying to ruin me. I'm telling the truth,
he shouted, trying to sound convincing. The silence that followed was broken by Michael's weary laugh. He shook his head, disappointed.
Really, John? That's your best excuse.
He said with a faint, sad smile. But the younger brother, realizing there was no salvation left, let despair consume him. His face twisted with rage, and with a mad scream, he yanked the machete from his belt and charged straight at the horse.
Damned horse. I may fall, but I'm taking you with me. I'll drag you straight to hell.
He roared, his eyes wild with madness. Stella screamed, trying to stop him. Michael, still weak, stretched out his arm in terror.
Buddy, watch out!
He cried, his voice hoarse with fear. But the horse didn't need a warning. He already knew. As soon as John got close, Buddy turned his body sharply and with perfect precision. His hind legs rose high, and with a single powerful kick, he struck the villain squarely. The impact was brutal. John was thrown several meters back, landing flat on his back, unconscious. For a few seconds, everyone stood frozen in shock. Then, spontaneous applause erupted from the workers, the neighbors, the friends. Stella smiled through her tears, and Michael, still seated inside the coffin, let out a weak but emotional laugh. Buddy, proud, lifted his front legs and neighed loudly, the same triumphant sound he always made when he sensed victory. It was his gesture of celebration, and now, more than ever, it was a cry for justice. In the days that followed, the story spread throughout the region. Michael, saved by a miracle and by his faithful horse, returned to life with a new purpose. The ranch, once a place of tragedy, became one of love and renewal. With Stella and Buddy by his side, Michael founded an animal rescue center devoted to caring for abandoned and injured animals, especially horses. Over time, the couple had a child, and in a symbolic gesture, the town priest, moved to tears, allowed something unprecedented. Buddy the horse took part in the baby's baptism, and no one could imagine how hard it was to get a horse inside a church. Years passed. Buddy found love too, a gentle mare he met at the rescue, and soon they had several foals. Michael's son grew up surrounded by nature, learning to respect life and animals just as his father had. Everything ended well. Well, almost everything. John, the villain, was arrested and sentenced for attempted murder. His name became synonymous with shame, and he rotted in prison far from the ranch he had once coveted. And so, fate made sure that everyone ended up exactly where they belonged. Comment friendship if you made it to the end of this story, and I'll mark your comment with a lovely heart. And just like our brave foal's tale, I have another one, even more moving, waiting for you. Just click the video on your screen now, and I'll tell you everything. A big kiss, and see you in the next emotional story.